You have here the leadership of the task forces, and I want to thank all of them for the work that they've done over this period of a number of weeks. It's been quite intense since we got about 250 abstracts submitted for the task forces. So they worked through that and established a set of policy briefs, and about 22, I think, policy briefs will be published. I believe some of them have gone live today or are going live shortly. You'll find a QR code that takes you to those policy briefs, and the last couple that are being edited will be added as soon as possible. Let me start by reminding everyone what the 4 task forces are. Transformative technologies, task force number 1, AI and quantum. Number 2, digitalization of the global economy. Number 3, environment, energy, and sustainable development. And then number 4, global peace and security. So I'm going to open it up to the chairs here to speak for about 5 minutes on important issues that came out for your mind relating to this thematic, and outline some of the key issues that are on your mind. And we'll start with Tracey Forrest, Chair of Task Force 1.
Well, I'm really excited to be here and honored to serve as the chair of the Transformative Technologies Task Force. Thank you, Paul. And I'm joined here by a distinguished panel of co-chairs, so Eleni Diamanti to my right and Taubi Simon as well, and online, Hodan Omar and Giacomo Percy-Pauli. So while it always feels like the right time to be advancing policy on important global issues, right now, today, it feels different, right? As Paul and our prior speaker mentioned, rapid changes afoot, both geopolitically, strategically, and having profound impacts across a wide array of dimensions: the economy, security, society, the environment, human rights. And of course, technology is at the heart of all of it, increasingly recognized for its dual-use potential to both serve humanity and warfare, and inextricably linked to data and intellectual property and a host of other issues, many of which are common across the task force areas. We focus on 2 transformative technologies, AI and quantum, and both offer unprecedented new capabilities. They unleash a new paradigm for information processing. While Canada hosts the G7 presidency this year, and as we celebrate 2025, the International Year of Quantum of Information Science and Technology, and as we witness a trajectory of AI impacts as they become clearer, we stand at a pivotal time. The policy decisions we make on these consequential technologies, those decisions will reverberate for years, if not decades, to come. And inherent in the development of any transformative technology is, of course, that the risk will be used for harm, and quantum and AI are no exception. We cannot minimize the risk of quantum-enabled cryptanalysis or AI-enabled cyber attack capabilities that they could have on cybersecurity, and nor can we ignore the broader risks associated with the development and use of such technologies. This makes it vitally important that we steer this technology towards societally beneficial outcomes. As Paul's mentioned, as part of the Think7 process, we solicited abstracts from around the world, and we received a very strong response. There will be 5, if not already, 5 policy briefs that are to be published to our website, and they raise a number of issues. And I thought to highlight 1 or 2 issues for you. One specifically relates to a cryptographically relevant quantum computer. This is perhaps the most well-known and well-studied risk associated with quantum computing. And there's a risk that a malicious actor could use a future quantum computer to attack our existing asymmetric and public key cryptography using something Shor's algorithm. While we don't have such a capable quantum computer today with over 1 million qubits, current estimates do show that this may occur within the next 10 years. And the urgency of this issue is underscored when we consider the long migration periods necessary to successfully transition to a quantum-safe infrastructure. Layered onto this is the store now, decrypt later scenario, whereby a malicious actor might basically store our data now, and maybe they have been for years, and then later on when a quantum computer is capable becomes available, that they will decrypt this information. So what we need to do is pay attention to our data, to our systems, especially data with long-term use, such as our national security data, our personal and health-related data, critical infrastructure data. So the takeaway is the need for global migration to quantum-safe systems. That issue was raised as part of our task force, and it's one of the focus areas of a brief. Another issue that is common to both quantum and AI is market concentration and supply chain resiliency. And another T7 policy brief recognizes that the formidable challenge at play for governments who are trying to both promote an open innovation, open access, democratized technology ecosystem, while at the same time trying to win the quantum arms race or the AI arms race. And they're doing this, of course, through restricted export controls, nationalizing supply chains. Turning to AI, the current AI governance landscape is highly fragmented. We don't yet have a globally accepted framework, and yet we know AI's rapid development poses grave risks, poses ethical, security, and socioeconomic challenges. Furthermore, the development of foundation models raises two key challenges: market concentration and post-deployment liability. And to address these challenges, our team of Think7 co-authors have put forward a set of recommendations framed around AI competition, consumer rights, open source AI development, and the importance of G7, G20 synergy. I very much look forward to our dialogue and very much look forward to engaging further with the Think7 quantum AI communities. Stakes are high on tech policy, and there's no better time to be strengthening our position. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tracey. And as we go through, please introduce yourself in a little bit of detail. So you're the research director of Transformative Technologies at CIGI. You're an engineer by training. You worked at the Quantum Computing Institute. I think it speaks to the interdisciplinary point that Jonathan Freed made a few moments ago, that really is an attempt here to talk to groups that don't necessarily work together on these kinds of issues. So, and Tracey, is there anything else you wanted to say about yourself? But did I do a fair introduction of you there? But others, feel free to describe yourself.
I think that's great, Paul. I think just to be brief and allow the other chairs to go forward. Thanks.
Fantastic. So next, we're going to turn to S. Yash Kailash, who is the research director for Digital Economy.
Thank you, Paul. Hello, everyone. My name is Yash Kailash, research director, Digital Economies at CIGI and chair of Task Force 2, Digitalization of the Global Economy. Come from a background in the corporate world, strategy consulting, having worked in India and the Middle East, and largely within the developing countries context. It's great to be a part of this panel and speak on behalf of Task Force 2, track that interestingly sits at the intersection of one of the most defining transformations of our time, the reconfiguration of the global economic system through digital technologies. The world today is not only experiencing an accelerated transition, but a geopolitical recalibration of how data, finance, and digital infrastructures are governed. Digitization is not really a sectoral issue anymore. It's a structural force that's reshaping the very logics of our markets, the concepts of sovereignty and power. And based on this, our task force focused on three interrelated priorities: the geopolitics of data governance, particularly tensions between data localization and cross-border data flows, the fracturing of the global economy marked by techno-sovereignty, regulatory divergence, and increased regionalization efforts, and the future of money and financial systems, especially in the lights of the advent of digital assets, tokenization, and AI-driven financial infrastructure. In reviewing the policy briefs, we came across several systemic challenges, and I'd like to name a few of them today. The first one being fragmentation. We're witnessing a proliferation of incompatible regulatory regimes, siloed infrastructures, and competing standards. All of this undermines innovations, burdens small and medium enterprises, and escalates geopolitical distrust. But what our analysis has revealed is that the call for harmonization is no longer sufficient. What is needed is pragmatic interoperability and architecture that allows for normative divergence, but enables technical convergence. Secondly, we're looking at the erosion of trust. Citizens today worldwide are skeptical of how their data is used, of the growing power of digital platforms and the security of digital finance. This trust deficit is a very existential force. Without legitimacy, even the most advanced systems will fail to scale. And that's why critical areas for the G7's consideration remain democratic oversight, data agency, and privacy-enhancing technologies. And third, the imbalance of power between public and private sectors. Today's dominant private digital actors are setting de facto standards around payments, cloud infrastructure, and AI without adequate public governance. In this light, the role of the government comes to the center. Should it be a market shaper and not just a regulator? And finally, digital exclusion. Across the world, among MSMEs, marginalized populations, the risk of digital marginalization is growing. The G7 has an important role here to play in capacity building and developing scalable participation frameworks that work for G7 nations and those beyond who share similar values. So what does this all mean for the G7 today? The G7 today has a unique opportunity, not to be the legislator for the world, but to serve as a platform for principal interoperability and discussion, to invest in adaptive, modular, and inclusive digital governance, and to move away from zero-sum narratives and towards architectures of trust, transparency, and shared innovation. I'd like to thank my co-chairs and policy brief contributors for engaging so thoroughly with this G7 process, and hopefully look forward to finalizing a set of impactful recommendations for the G7's consideration across the next day and a half. Thank you. And just to highlight my co-chairs, I'm joined by Margie Burscher and Peter Morgan, and online Ananya Kumar. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Yash. And so many issues there, right? And it does remind me that tomorrow we will experience the tariff bomb, also known as Liberation Day, in south of the border, which is going to provoke a lot of the issues that you're talking about. So again, to the point of, we live in interesting times, all of these issues are getting accelerated by the geopolitics and other things that are happening right now. So next, we're going to hear from Task Force 3 on Environment, Energy, and Sustainable Development. The chair is Patricia Fuller. Over to you, Patricia.
Thank you, Paul. Pleasure to be here. I'm Patricia Fuller, the president of the International Institute for Sustainable Development, headquartered in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and with offices in Geneva, Toronto, Ottawa, and staff spread around the world working on sustainable development issues. And as the chair of this task force on energy, environment, and sustainable development, I'm honored to have been joined by 4 co-chairs, also from around the world: Sébastien Tellier, Isabella Texera, Fabi Tumiwa, and Shanaz Musa, who are representing and leading think tanks from France, Brazil, Indonesia, and South Africa. Unfortunately, none of them were available to join us here today, given time difference issues and Eid and other things, but I'll do my best to represent them in telling you about the work that we have been doing. I was pleased to have Jonathan Freed, who I must say is a old boss of mine from when I was in the government of Canada, reference that the G7 has consistently over the years had an important focus on energy, environment, and climate change issues. And that stands to reason. These are global issues that are challenging people around the world. We are facing a crisis in what is coming at us and is already impacting people around the world in terms of warming temperatures and all of the attendant impacts of climate change, as well as the severe impacts we witness on biodiversity from the climate crisis, as well as from the impact of human activity. So these challenges are significant, and the G7 has traditionally taken this at the heart of its agenda. And so as we convened as a task force, our perspective was really how do we help the Canadian chair figure out how to continue to show leadership in this space in what is a complex situation, evidently, with the positioning of the Trump administration. So certainly energy security is regarded as an area of potential common ground. And so that was one of the areas that the task force chose to focus on, and linking energy security with climate change. Secondly, financing for sustainable development is an area that we chose to focus on. And thirdly, industrial decarbonization and trade, which is a very important area, linking trade and industry globally. So we had a very strong response to our call for abstracts, and the result was 5 policy briefs with authors from think tanks and research institutes from all over the world, ranging from Pakistan, Germany, Japan, India, and so forth. And I'll just tell you a few words about what came out of those briefs. So on energy and security, a brief from Professor Munir Kasru of IPAC, who will join us for the discussion this afternoon, pointing to how the global energy landscape is experiencing a fundamental transformation driven by climate imperatives and technological innovation. Renewable energy is accelerating in its progress towards tipping points and challenging traditional energy paradigms. Yet at the same time, international cooperation is crucial to achieving equitable and effective energy transitions, and therefore the role of the G7 is critical, and it can really act as a platform for collaboration with the Global South. And the paper points to the importance of renewable energy in reducing dependency on imported fossil fuels and protecting against price volatility, which is really a key linkage with energy security, and how the G7 can lead through strategic investments, policy innovation, and international collaboration, and in particular through innovative financing mechanisms, as well as through eliminating tariffs on what could be an agreed list of critical technologies. Also important link with the other task force, I think, is the big role that artificial intelligence can play in renewable energy systems and really transformative opportunities for optimizing grids and enhancing energy efficiency. And then another paper from Adel Kadri of a think tank in Pakistan and his co-authors, focusing on the link between climate change and instability and fragility in fragile settings in particular, including through food insecurity, as well as the important issue of critical minerals and how that is an energy security issue. So that paper discusses the need to both support developing countries in building resilience to climate change, as well as the importance of securing and diversifying supply chains for critical minerals, and doing things such as collaborating to harmonize environmental and social standards, and fostering partnerships around critical minerals such as the MSP. Just quickly going through the others, the financing area, a very good paper on on debt distress and the link between debt and climate, really underlying how low-income countries hit by climate impacts have to spend money to address those impacts and go deeper into debt, and then are less able to in turn invest in resilience. And so their call on the G7 to respond to the debt crisis, which has expanded considerably in recent years, with the share of low-income countries in debt distress almost doubling in 10 years. So pointing to innovative approaches such as debt for resilience swaps. In the industrial decarbonization area, again, an interesting link with some of my fellow co-chairs here. It's really about interoperable standards, in this case for emissions reporting, which can really remove burden from business as they seek to decarbonize their industries. So a very interesting paper there. And then finally, on investor-state dispute settlement. This is kind of a different area from the others, but a very interesting link that the G7 could certainly focus on as they look to issues of sovereignty and protecting of policy space. This paper points to the impact that investment treaties and their provisions for investor-state dispute settlement are having on the policy space of countries to regulate and take action on climate change, and recommends that this investment regime should be overhauled with the removal of investor-state settlement provisions from international investment agreements, and that this is an opportunity that the G7 could take leadership on. So I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patricia. Another huge set of issues, and I realize that any one of these task forces could be the entirety of the conversations that would take place here, because there's so much in there, right? So bear with us as we unpack each one of these issue sets into task forces, and you're gonna keep hearing more and more as we go through. One thing that struck me, Patricia, about their overall framing is, of course, from a historical perspective, it's only about the last 100 years where human activities reached such a point where they were impacting global systems, whether it's the atmosphere or the oceans or even terrestrial systems. And at the same time, now we're at a point where human needs are at their highest point, right? Energy and other needs. So there's this tension that we can't get away from about the impacts on the planet and the human needs. And so it's such a critical set of issues there that we're talking about today. So we're going to go to the final task force, and then we're going to open it up to the co-chairs. The last task force 4, is Global Peace and Security, and we have Raquel Garbers here with us today.
I'm Raquel Garbers. I am a visiting executive here at CIGI, where I have the great privilege of being enabled by CIGI to co-lead the stand-up of a new program here called Canada at Economic War. Now, we stood up this program a couple of days before Liberation Day came into the frame of things geopolitically. We may not have seen the specificity of Liberation Day coming, but we certainly saw Canada at economic war in a world at economic war coming. So with that, my background is in the defense and security community in the Government of Canada. And previous to coming to CIGI, I served as the head of strategic policy at the Department of National Defence, architecting Canada's new defence policy. Just before I make some opening comments to really at a high level frame the sort of thinking behind the mindset that myself and my co-chairs brought into the task force work, I would like to very much thank my co-chairs, 2 of whom are here today, Sophie Arts and Justin Bassey, second from the end. We had some pretty spectacular minds on those co-chairs, some great thinking, to be frank. And so you can imagine my profound relief when there was consistency in thinking on those papers, because it really could have been quite a debate that could have stretched on for days, given how expertise you all are in your areas. So thank you very much. So one of the things we started with as a team was thinking, when you think about where we are in terms of global peace and security today, and where we will be 6 months from now, 5 months from now, 10 years from now, the most compelling thing we need to start with understanding is what is driving fundamentally the changes in global peace and security. And hands down, the most fundamental change is the ongoing collapse of the post-war order. Now, the evidence of what that means for global peace and security is already stark, and it's already here, right? So we have Russia waging war in Europe with the assistance of China, North Korea, and Iran. We have China waging an increasingly aggressive economic war against the United States and its allies. We have a growing and real risk of nuclear proliferation. We have a growing and real risk that conventional war between major powers is no longer unimaginable. And we have a growing risk that in any war between China and the United States, it is not perhaps certain who might win such a war. So we really are living not just in interesting times, but arguably in the most dangerous times since the end of World War II. Looking at all of that, countries around the world are asking themselves some basic fundamental questions, including, what does this mean, and what do I need to do to help my country, to position my country for this rising geopolitical order that's not yet quite here? So the answers to that will be written by the historians in retrospect. However, what we can say today is, and I think our co-chairs all agreed on, is that there are 3 fundamental trends that are driving where the system will go, all of which are related to the breakdown of the existing order. Trend 1 is the shifting architecture of the global order. So we are seeing that the institutions of that order are failing. And as they fail, new institutions and groupings are being established. In particular, minilateral groupings of very capable states coming together with agility to direct their efforts and energies to a specific issue. This carries implications for what happens in a world that is simultaneously really diving headfirst into the digital era. Who is making those rules? And will those rules be consistent across these groupings? Now, these minilaterals are super important because they are the power centers of the future. World leaders know that, thinkers know that, and so all are asking themselves, how do I get into these minilaterals? How do I get in there and position my country and position my values? Well, this leads us to the second trend in the global order, which is the growing convergence between economic and military power. Now, these 2 things have always been very tightly connected, but they are now inseparable, if not indistinguishable. We know this because we know about supply chains. We know this because we know hyper-globalization means interconnected innovation ecosystems, interconnected inputs, interconnected manufacturing, interconnected distribution systems. It is impossible to distinguish economic from military power. And so then they say to themselves, all right, well, I need to be in the minilaterals that are focused on economic and military power. What is really going to be the focal point inside those organizations? And this brings us to trend 3, the final trend, which is the fact that we are in an escalating and accelerating tech race. He who wins the tech race will decide the rules of the next global order. So never really has there been a time where the G7 was more suited to the fundamental daunting task ahead of the global community with regard to peace and security. The G7 is the small and agile minilateral that has the capacity to lead the fight. The G7 brings together the world's foremost economic and military powers to work together in cooperation to try and chart a path against authoritarian adversaries. And the G7, if it works together, has the capacity to shape and win the tech race. Now, in the papers that we received, it was really quite fascinating from the authors. We ended up choosing 2 that were geographically focused, and both of those papers had built-in solutions that rested on who wins the tech race and where does the tech play in terms of the solution and the rebuild of the security crises in Ukraine and the Indo-Pacific. The other two papers were tech-focused, autonomous weapon systems and AI for diplomacy for conflict prevention. And both of those papers very conscientiously put their thinking and their analysis inside the realities of the geopolitical world. So to circle back to the beginning of Paul's comments, we are in a global world where tech, geopolitics, geoeconomics are all inseparable. Interdisciplinary solutions are the only solutions because there will be no solutions unless you bring tech thinkers together with the geopolitical strategists. And so, speaking on behalf of myself and my co-chairs, as the geostrategists, we are absolutely thrilled to have this opportunity to work close up with the tech experts. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Raquel. Let me stress two things that I think struck me coming out of those comments. And one of them you alluded to, and the other one you didn't really. But the first one is the dual use point that Tracey started us off with, that most of these technologies right now are fundamentally dual use. Many technologies have always been dual use, but right now, the ones that are the most significant are absolutely dual use, meaning both civilian and military applications potential. And there's no way to really know where that is going as the technology is being developed. You have to assume that they're dual use. And so this is a fundamental question. The one that you didn't allude to would be that you did talk about the risk of proliferation, nuclear weapons, which is absolutely the case. But there's also now a defense spending binge that is coming, if I could put it that way. In a tight fiscal environment, it doesn't mean there's going to be lots of money to go around everywhere, but it feels like we are heading down, certainly within NATO countries, within the G7 countries, and probably in most G20 countries, we're heading down a path of increased defense spending, which raises all kinds of issues. So let's come back to that over the course of this conversation. So now what we're going to do, and let me just pause for a moment here to thank everyone who submitted an abstract and a policy brief to this process. And I know some of you are here in the audience and a number of you are online. A lot of work goes into that, and we really appreciate the people that took the time to submit those abstracts and policy briefs. And it was very difficult to choose from a very high set quality of submissions. So now we're going to move to the task force co-chairs. And I'll go in the same order, starting with task force 1. Toby, and if you could start with saying a word about yourself as well, and then I'll come to you, Eleni, after. So Toby, please.
Thank you, Paul, for inviting me to join this task force. Thank you, Aaron, and thank you, Tracey and Jenny. I've had the pleasure of being part of CIGI for a number of years. I earlier was a commissioner in a global commission that CIGI and Chatham House in London had set up on internet governance primarily, but the part that I looked after was more cybersecurity. That was somewhere around 2013. So we did it about 4.5 years in different parts of the world. One of the conferences we did it in India, where Synergia hosted it in Bangalore. Let me give you, in the 5 minutes I have now, 3 or 4 points. One, the larger context of what we are speaking is the priority of G7. And I will look at 3 things in particular. One is promoting sustainable, resilient, inclusive, and quality infrastructure, including maritime security. This is very important. This goes to the basis of everything that is vulnerable, which was discussed in the task force, which is the threats to critical infrastructure. If you don't protect your critical infrastructures, you might find it very difficult. Today, critical infrastructure encompasses your banks, your financial institutions, your electricity, your water. We did an explanation in Bangalore that if we don't have electricity for 48 hours, there is no water in Bangalore of about 15 million people. So the critical dependency on different aspects and the vulnerability that cyber puts in was sort of exemplified there. The second is the need to build globally resilient cyber and AI systems. Why cyber? Because we all concluded in the last there are no air gaps in cybersecurity. I mean, nobody can ever say that they can build something. Now we are looking about a cybersecurity which has to look at both quantum and AI. So what is a world of cybersecurity or digital security in a world that has to look at both quantum and AI? The third, which we look at, is how do you counter hybrid threats, which is basically manipulation of your data, your personal information. You could have misinformation, disinformation. This is basically something that will go to the core of any society that has to build something which is sustainable and inclusive. Everything else around food security, everything is very important. But if your personal liberty and your personal freedom is gone, then you have a different challenge at your end. There are two parts of AI cybersecurity which I want to say. That, as Tracey had also alluded, all quantum, two parts of quantum. All quantum security is about protecting, and there are two parts. One is the protection part and one is the offensive part. And most of advanced and transformative technologies, you will find that the underbelly of the technology is in armed forces and military. And they are the ones who first validate these technologies. So when we try to put out these technologies into the civil world, I think it is extremely important for us to know what are those areas where quantum, first I will speak, will have a great play. And that would be in quantum computing. But then we should not forget quantum cyber warfare, quantum magnetometry, quantum radar. These are 4 or 5 things which are extremely critical. And in the same way, if you look at AI, you would find that the next battles would be on a platform that people will build called AI HAPS, high altitude pseudo satellites. Why I am saying is, we're all talking about security and protecting, but if you do not understand that these high altitude pseudo satellites, which creates something called a high altitude operating system, is going to be critical for real-time warfare. And let me conclude by saying what AI is not first and what is the challenge. What AI is not and is a challenge is going to be that you cannot ensure accuracy. Number 2, you cannot ensure fairness. Number 3, you cannot guarantee that it is not biased. Number 4, the quality of data. It can be poisoned. Number 5, explainability. And number 6, interpretability. So these are what AI is not. And what is AI? And I conclude by saying it is vulnerable. There are trapdoors and backdoors to it. You can poison the data, then everything that you have in data in AI goes wrong. You have a problem of it being exploited for weakness. You have exfiltration, and you have deepfakes. So if we understand these and look at this whole story of transformative, or we call it more advanced technologies or deep technologies, you would find that as you play with it, as you use it, there are far more challenges which we will find it, as much as we found it difficult to monitor cyber, because the greatest risk of cyber was how do you do attribution to cyber? So you're going to have a bigger challenge in a world where all your data can be hacked, and the strategy today is, you hack now and you store it and decrypt it later whenever quantum becomes much more accessible to people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Toby, and thank you for noting how cross-cutting cyber is. There is no domain that is separate from cyber, even at the individual level in our own lives. And one thing you said about AI that I want to stress is that there's a long list of advantages of things you can use AI for, particularly generative AI. There's an equally long list of risks and cautions and problems that are inherent to that AI. There's no way to design an AI generative system that does not have some degree of hallucination or some degree of of limitations or biases in its set. And of course, as rich data is mined and scraped, then we get into the use of synthetic data and these, AI-generated data. So you're absolutely right in pointing out that it's almost like a new form of pollution that will be out there in AI and digital systems that we're going to have to be very attentive to. So next, I'm going to turn to the other co-chair who's with us here in person. Eleni, over to you.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. I'd like to thank Tracey, first of all, and Janie and the CIGI for giving me this opportunity to participate in this extremely stimulating experience. So maybe I can give you a little bit information on my background. So I'm an academic researcher. I've been working in the field of quantum technologies, in particular quantum cryptography and quantum communication networks, since several years now. I actually started when it was a fundamental physics topic, and I've seen it. I consider I had the privilege to see it evolving in this period into a field of great strategic importance, which brings us, of course, here today. So I think one of the first things that I'd like to emphasize is the importance of working together. That has been also stressed by Jonathan and by quite a few of the speakers, the importance of the interdisciplinary research. So, for example, and work together in this policy framework. So in this task force, we work together, researchers, policy makers, economists, international relations experts, and for me that was extremely instructive. I find that it's also one of the almost obligation for academic researchers as well to put our know-how that has been built over several years of exercising in this field in the service of fact-based, informed policy framework in tech-related fields, because it's very easy for such fields to diverge, if it's not really based on very crucial expertise. So I'm going to put in the center of this the importance of knowing what you're talking about. Okay, so that you gain through, of course, long year academic expertise. So, having said that, now moving a little bit more into the specifics of our task force, AI and quantum. I'll focus a little bit more on quantum, naturally, because it's closer to my expertise. So it's interesting because right now in Europe, so I'm based in France, I should say, I'm based in Paris, in Sorbonne University in Paris, and I participate in the Strategic Advisory Board of the EU Quantum Technologies Flagship Program. That is, and as of my role in this Strategic Advisory Board, and together with other colleagues, we are drafting right now, as part of this Quantum Technologies Coordination Group, an initial document that will feed the future European Quantum Act. Okay, so in the same way, so our commissioner has in Europe has stressed the importance of quantum technologies, as of course we've seen. So there will be a Quantum Act in Europe that a bit like the CHIPS Act, the AI Act, that most of you know and that have served a lot as a regulatory basis in this field. I think in Europe we are sometimes accused of over-regulating, which may stifle innovation in some ways, but I actually do think and I support very much that regulating and putting down in a very clear format some rules and how this should be linked to responsible innovation is extremely important. So I'm actually supporting very heavily this way of doing things, hoping that we can translate these directives also in the G7 framework, together, of course, with everything that comes from the other G7 economies and countries. So in this Quantum Act, a major role is played by quantum infrastructure. So there is a very big focus in, of course, as the central piece for quantum computing, crypto, and chips manufacturing infrastructures as a means to translate research and training into something practical, and then also because it provides deployment and actual concrete infrastructure basis for industry then and standardization bodies to do their job, to create the market and to rely on this infrastructure. And there is also this idea of building these competence clusters in Europe, and so some that have an observatory role and also accompany the transition linked to quantum technologies, involving in a significant way all the important stakeholders. So why am I saying this? Because this is very nicely mirrored and aligned with some of the recommendations that we saw in our task force. So for example, if we take the two policy briefs specific for quantum technologies, the one on the quantum safe transition and the other one on resilience of supply chains, which is also hit exactly like Tracey said to AI as well, to issues linked to AI. So we see this need. These are complex transitions. Working on these topics are very complex. So the recommendations go a lot into the direction of building, maintaining, sustaining, and developing dynamically the necessary infrastructures, which we should not forget. Quantum is not finished. It's not that we're done with the technology and now we only need to regulate and see. It's ongoing. It's an ongoing endeavor. We can already see how much research is happening in quantum computing to see that there is so much more that we will need to integrate dynamically in the next phases of this, while at the same time we regulate and we go for policy framework. So this is a very important point to consider. And so there is this need to create, maintain, and sustain these infrastructures, in particular for quantum safe transition, and involve all the necessary stakeholders. Okay, that go from policy, of course, makers, to national security agencies, to researchers, academics, to standardization bodies, and I'm sure I'm forgetting a few of the stakeholders, but these are large endeavors. It's a long-term procedure that we will need to kickstart from now if we really want it to be done on time for when this groundbreaking quantum technology will be available, and it's just a matter of time. So this kind of concludes the main points.
Super. Anytime you talk about quantum technology, I think it's one of the most intimidating topics in the world for most people, because it's about quantum physics and it kind of enters that philosophical realm as well as sophisticated physics. But one of the main takeaways I would have of your points are that it's exemplary of the need for countries to get ahead of issues that are emerging quickly, sometimes more quickly than we think, as we saw with generative AI, where people knew it was progressing, but not quite that quickly. And then suddenly it was here. And now in G7 countries, most countries don't have really something comprehensive on generative AI and AI. And even the EU that did move early on the AI Act had to play catch up once generative AI was introduced. So you're drawing a parallel to the quantum technologies, particularly in the communications area where things are moving quite quickly already, and we could be facing a surprise there before we know it if we're not ready. So let's move on to Task Force 2 co-chairs. We have, and thank you all the co-chairs that traveled very far. I know we have people that have traveled from India, from Europe, from Australia, from Asia. Peter Morgan, you've traveled from Japan, I believe, to be with us, and so over to you.
Yes, I'd just like to pick up on some of the things that Yash mentioned, and of course I'd also like to thank Yash and Jede for inviting me to be on the task force. I've been with the Asian Development Bank Institute in Tokyo, which is the think tank of the Asian Development Bank, and I've been working mainly in the areas of financial inclusion, financial literacy, and financial technology. So I guess that's kind of my entry point to this kind of debate. We've been looking a lot at this issue of the digital divide, which has been mentioned in a number of our policy briefs. For example, if you look at the financial side, we've been doing a lot of surveys of use of digital financial technology in some of the lower income countries. And what we find is that the real revolutionary platform or the real revolutionary development has been the introduction of the mobile phones, particularly smartphones, which has really brought the potential of online financial transactions to a large number of a large swathe of the population of these countries, and I think that ties in with the issue of what can the G7 countries do about that, and the capacity building is really the important potential contribution, and I think that's both on the physical side. The physical side, the internet infrastructure, but also the human capital side, which is knowledge about finance, knowledgeable about digital technology, trust in the financial system. So that when we do these surveys, we find that people may have smartphones, but they still use them primarily for you're looking at social media, news, that kind of thing. The actual uptake of use of financial services is still more limited, and that has to do with things like financial literacy and trust in the financial system. Also, there share issues of connectivity. If you look at the Pacific Island countries, where we recently did a survey, even these small island countries within themselves, they are archipelagos. They have many small islands which are even less served than perhaps the main island. So that just getting the connectivity to them, it is still going to be a major task. If you look at countries like Bangladesh, for example, you have connectivity more in the urban or semi-urban areas, but less so in the very rural areas. So I think that there's a real potential for a contribution there, both on the physical side and on the human capital side. So let me stop there. Thanks.
Thank you, Peter. This strikes me as a good moment to just note the cross-linkage between all the task forces. You talk about mostly the positive sides of digitalization and the impact on the global economy, and there's a lot of expectation that that's where the productivity gains are going to be that we need, with relatively slow global economic growth playing out. So there's a lot of optimism about it, and I think there should be. But when you think about how that intersects with the other three task forces, there are risks associated with all of it, right? If you think of the global security angle, will these systems be safe and secure? Will they be weaponized? When you think of the environment and energy sustainable development side, will they be sustainable technologies? How much energy are these systems using, whether it's new forms of digital payments or other things? And then when you think of the transformative technologies, are we ready for what comes next and could be really disruptive in this space, both positively and negatively? So it makes me think of a lot of the linkages. Let's turn now to the other co-chair here from Task Force 2, who's with us, Marjorie Bookshare, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you. I'm delighted to be back in Canada, at least for a few days. And I want to thank CIGI, but also my co-chair for already very stimulating discussions. So I represent today Chatham House, which is a think tank based in London, where for many years I was the executive director of the Digital Society program, which I still advise, and I also advise UNESCO members on their digital policy packages. And so my angle comes from that background of governance and policy. And one of the issues that I want to briefly address this morning, which is really central to the work of the G7 for the last few years, but also I think a topic that a lot of you already broached, is a question of data and cross-border data. And so I think I'm not saying anything controversial by saying that data is the lifeblood of digital economies, but also the foundation of technology innovation, especially when we look at advanced AI models. And so already in 2019, Japan launched the concept of data free flow with trust, which was to promote the use of data for social and economic benefit, but also to globally, internationally try to manage the concern around cross-border data from privacy to security. And for the last several years, basically, the G7 has been advancing this concept, first really quickly identifying cross-border data as a key issue and sort of trying to identify common goals and share vision around what cross-border data should look like. And so this year, 2025, where do we stand on this process? And I think for like many other issues when it comes to technology governance, we're moving from the question from defining principle to now identifying the action. How do you operationalize those principles and concept? And how do you implement concretely data free flow with trust? Now the few of the key problems that we're facing is one, and I think Yash alluded to it, is the regulatory divergences. We're still facing a kaleidoscope of different regulatory framework and approaches when it comes to data, and really create some challenge when it comes to the implementation of a global data free data governance system. The second issue, and I think it was mentioned already, is that one has to be realistic of what we can achieve in the current geopolitical context. And the notion of cooperation, multilateral cooperation is difficult, but also within G7 members. And so a few months ago, maybe the notion of harmonizing or aligning some of the regulatory framework was a distant but possible outcome. And now it seems less so, if not foolish. So one of the key reflections that we had in the task force, but also with a lot of the author of the policy brief we received, is what is achievable in the current context and how could we advance collaboration for cross-border data. And I think one of the positive conclusions is that most of the authors would agree, and I think that's what they're pushing, that cooperation is still possible. And that we actually receive quite a lot of policy briefs related to data free flow with trust and sort of really urging to continue the cooperation there. However, I think that there's also a realization that this cooperation may take a different form, may be more technical, more regional, more specific. And I think some of the solutions that were advanced were really trying to advance maybe regional harmonization where possible, or to advance interoperability around specific area of data governance, should it be data security or data privacy or specific area of AI. So basically still stating the importance of data governance and cooperation, global cooperation, and G7 effort there, but also trying to find new avenues to cooperate in the current geopolitical context.
Super, thank you. I want to make a comment here about the emergence of the intangibles economy, right? The dominance of data. And, when you look at the largest companies in the world, the fastest growing companies, a lot of them, the vast majority, are in this space of intangibles and data. What you used the expression data free flow with trust, which is a fantastic expression. We used to have, in a way, in the older system, the free flow of goods and services with trust, right? The trust is eroded a little bit there in terms of how the trade relationships work, but it was easier to track these goods and services than it is to track data, right? So there's a challenge in this new system to achieve that free flow of data and trust. And you pointed to privacy being the most, in a way, fundamental ingredient of this. And I think for most people, as consumers of products like apps, we've kind of put privacy as a bit of a secondary consideration when we click on I agree. And that has probably not been as straightforward as we might imagine, right? What we've actually agreed to. And so at the level of countries, you really want to be certain what you're clicking on to agree to. And we'll come back to the issue of data sovereignty, I think, in the course of the conversation here now. Thank you very much for those comments. So we're going to move on to the last task force. And I want to thank all the participants here for doing these really rich, bite-sized presentations without PowerPoint presentations. We could have had long graphs and things like that, but I appreciate that everyone has been very, very succinct here. We're going to Task Force 4, Global Peace and Security. We have Sophie Arts with us here to start off, please.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for CIGI for organizing this, and thanks to Raquel for chairing our task force. My name is Sophie Arts, and I'm a fellow with the German Marshall Fund of the United States, which is a transatlantic think tank headquartered in Washington, D.C., with 7 offices in Europe, and we work on fostering transatlantic cooperation, which used to be an issue that had a lot more consensus across the transatlantic world, at least, and is facing increasingly an uphill battle. And I'm originally from Germany, but I've been based in DC since 2016. And so the DC discussions are informing a lot of my thinking. And I've been working specifically on transatlantic security, NATO issues, and for the last few years, specifically Nordic and Arctic security and geostrategic competition. So a lot of the issues that are being discussed here today are issues that I also think about a lot in my work. And I just wanted to, being one of the later speakers, foot stomp a few of the issues that have been mentioned throughout the comments already today. And one, of course, is intersectionality. We've heard it so many times already today. I think it's very reflective of how much broader the definition of security and defense is today, to Raquel's points earlier. I think this is very much reflected in the abstracts and ultimately the papers that we received within our task force. There's so much overlap with the digital and some of the other task forces. We got a few entries as well that focus specifically on climate security as well, but ultimately decided not to move forward with those, since there was a specific task force devoted to that as well. But really shows how integrated security is today. We, as was alluded to already, we had a paper that looked specifically at the Indo-Pacific region, but looked very much at critical infrastructure security, supply chain security, and open sea lines of communication. We had a paper that looked at an AI-enabled diplomacy, so looking at the opportunities within AI, using some of the AI tools when it comes to strategic foresight that are already being used by a lot of the G7 countries, but that could benefit from greater coordination and greater facilitation of actual action, joint action on the G7 level. And then we also had a paper at some point that I think didn't make it to the final round that focused on cryptographic resilience. So there's been a lot of overlap with these issues. And so I just briefly also wanted to come back to the role of the G7, because I think that was a big point of discussion within our task force. Because, of course, as Raquel mentioned, the G7 seems to be such a suitable format in today's world where consensus is harder to come by, and bigger multilateral organizations can't often derive at this consensus to move issues forward. But on the flip side of this, we had the issue that we were dealing with, or we're addressing some topics like autonomous weapon systems and kind of the categorization and limitations on autonomous weapon systems that we felt was a very important issue and was one of the papers that we selected. But it really seems to go very much beyond the scope of the G7, especially because China plays such a big role in it. And so we're really kind of emphasizing the role of the G7 as kind of a spearhead force, as kind of a force to get set a spark and get processes rolling, but that really, in the end, a lot of these issues when it comes to regulation require much broader buy-in, which of course is much more difficult to come by today. And so on the flip side, I guess, we have the issue that is perhaps a little bit newer to the G7, where even though the G7, of course, is such a nimble format, consensus is also increasingly hard to come by in the G7 format. And I think that particularly informed some of the decisions that we made and the papers that we selected, because we really focused on implementability and making sure that these recommendations would really be viable and be able to eventually perhaps be featured in the ultimate communique. And so we try to address that question as well, keeping in mind that the kind of lowest common denominator might be shrinking, and so yeah, I think I'll probably close with that and leave it to the final.
Thanks, Sophie. Thanks very much. Thanks for stressing the role of the G7 as well. That, as you know, it's celebrating its 50th anniversary this year. So that's a big deal. It's not always agreed 100% on the issues, which of course, you're not going to do, but it has managed to consistently act as a catalyst and deliver leadership. And I personally, I'm optimistic that we're on a pretty good track for G7 this year. It was not a given that the G7 would work easily together, but it's off to a good start, and it looks like it's going to deliver, which I think is essential, right? There are not many cooperation groups right now that are functioning well, so critical. So Justin Bassi, we have you from Australia. I don't know if you're jet lagged or not, and we've kept you for the last speaker, so thank you for being patient. Over to you.
And really grateful for the opportunity to be here. Yes, all the way from Australia, but I think worth it. A very good cause. I think CIGI and everyone involved, particularly Raquel, for sharing our theme so well. I think Raquel's intro really set the scene on where things stand with geopolitics and geostrategy, and unfortunately, I can't disagree. She's right that we have seen a breakdown of the post-World War II world order. I think, though, we have to look beyond the last few weeks. I think we are all understandably why here in Canada there's a fixation on it, but to understand why there has been that breakdown, we have to look past a few weeks. The breakdown happened before Trump became president, and really the theme of global peace and security could probably be global conflict and insecurity. There's not much peace or security around the world. Russia, Iran, China, North Korea pressing. We see it in Australia. I see it around the liberal democratic worlds. Politicians want to put in their speeches, we've got to do this to maintain stability. Well, we've lost stability. We've got to actually get beyond business as usual to regain stability that we've lost. And I think that for our theme was a really interesting and important discussion that we were having. I think we've got a real problematic starting point in liberal democratic societies. Those countries that make up the G7 and G7 partner countries, that we are geared for collaboration. The problem is that we think of collaboration as a good in itself, and Russia and China in particular are well aware of it, and they prey on our desire to collaborate. We actually go out of our way to cooperate with our adversaries. We go to extreme lengths to find topics, and we say, well, with China, of course, we need to cooperate on climate change, but then we don't seem to recognize that, okay, if you're cooperating with China on climate, it probably means in the solar panel area that you're creating a monopoly where you've only got one source, and all your solar panels are made from slave labor in Xinjiang. But yet we're cooperating, I suppose. So that's, again, only if you view cooperation as a good in itself. And then we tolerate their bad behavior. in a way that we don't tolerate bad behaviour from our non-adversaries, our friends. If you have a look at the Australia or UK China policies, it's a cooperate-based policy that both countries have, and I think a lot of other countries have as well. To me, these cooperate-based policies seem to be modelled on the pre-2022 European Russia policies, again, of cooperation, that then we know they fail. And to put it into context, when President Trump imposed his global tariffs, steel and aluminium, including on Australia, the Australian response was very strong. Hit back hard. The Prime Minister said it was unjustified, unprovoked, unfriendly act. Other ministers referred to it as a dog act. But we don't use that language when China acts against us, not just in trade, but in all areas. They can harm our Navy personnel with sonar pulses. They can circumnavigate Australia with their flotillas and use their research vessels. And the response is, we'd prefer that it didn't happen, but what can we do about it? It's not necessarily illegal. Well, I think what this process shows and this group shows is that there is a lot that we can do. And the answer is cooperate, but it's to cooperate with friends, not with adversaries. We're just unwilling to risk any tension with our adversaries. And the problem is that the Russians and the Chinese regimes, they know that, and they then push, and they don't compromise. I think something that the G7 grouping can do is to look at and fundamentally reverse what we view as deterrence and coercion. That we've gone into a mode of saying, well, I'm not going to make this decision because I don't want to be coerced. But if you only view coercion as a post-action punishment, you've actually misunderstood what coercion is, because if you are actually making non-decisions, that's still a decision, and that's still coercion. Australia sees it, Germany has seen it for years with 5G, not wanting to make a 5G decision because of fears of the economic coercion of the automobile industry. That's coercion. And so Raquel again is right, that what's the answer? We've gone into a era of minilaterals. We have minilaterals around the world like AUKUS, Five Eyes, Quad, all very important. To me, the G7 is just as important, if not more important, because of who is at the table. And in my view, a successful arrangement over the last few years, as the Australian invited here, is the G7 Plus arrangement, because those collectives, that's what the countries like Russia and China fear the most. They want to deal with us bilaterally. If we can do it as a collective, that's where we're most strong. And when you've only got really Japan on the G7, that has its priority of the Indo-Pacific. You know, one of the papers that we had that Sophie and Raquel talked about was a Indo-Pacific based paper. We need to collapse the Euro-Atlantic and the Indo-Pacific the way that we've collapsed economics and security over the past decade. Bring both those regions together. We're fundamentally facing the same challenges, and that's what I think the G7 process can do.
Thanks so much. So great way to put a cap on this discussion of the task force leaders here. I think you're saying that I think you're alluding to the fact that there is a breakdown in the order. The order has broken down, but the pieces have not yet reassembled, right, in some form. But we've lost the stability and the certainty of the previous system, and in a way it makes as is sometimes described as a might makes right moment, right? Where if you exert power, you'll get away with it because there is no system established. And that includes the kind of the self-censorship that you alluded to, which is a form of coercion, that you just don't do something because you'll get smacked on it, right, in one way or another. So very, very significant. You mentioned G7 Plus. Let's come back to that as we have the discussion. So we've heard from all the task force leaders here. We have a few minutes for an open discussion here, and then I'm going to take 5 minutes at the end to describe the rest of today's program. I wasn't sure if I had time for that in the introduction, but there'll be 5 minutes to do that here. So we've got a few minutes. Trying to think of a question that cuts across all of the task forces, and there are many, but one that occurs to me that's particularly significant is the question of autonomy and human agency, right? So if you think of all of these issues here, whether it's autonomous weapons in the security domain, whether it's financial stability in the digital economy because you've delegated certain tasks to smart contracts or cryptography, or even whether it's in the environment or energy systems, if you're tasking AI to watch over a nuclear reactor or an energy system, there are very much these humans in control question. And of course, on the transformative AI and quantum, much of it is about human agency and at what point would we agree to let the AI or the machine be in charge. So the question I'm opening up to all of you here is do you see this as a clear issue where it must always be human in control? Whatever system we're talking about here, you should not, I'm not trying to lead your answer, but could there be a case where we go fully autonomous on certain things, or will we be required to? Is there a game of chicken perhaps here? How do you see this issue? I'll open it up to anyone who wants to come in on this question of human agency versus the way technology is advancing in your space. Raquel, I see your hand first to start us off.
Thanks. This might sound like I'm dodging your question, but I'm going to add a layer of complexity to it, and I'm going to refer back to Justin's comments about privileging cooperation with adversaries over our own, I won't even say self-interest, our own self-defense. Autonomous weapons is an excellent example of an area where adversaries work very hard to frustrate global efforts towards resolving those questions in a cooperative way, whether the solutions be technology-based or based on, values and norms. And so you end up with a situation where you have Western countries, their allies and partners, that sort of camp of the world, spending great deal of time and energy discussing the question that you have raised and arguing amongst themselves over how to make progress in that area, while meanwhile the adversaries are marching right ahead, developing the systems without human agency, testing the systems, fielding the systems, and as a result, we are facing a situation where you will have the good guys discussing the issue while the other guys are holding a loaded gun to our heads. And so I think that is very much part of the complexity around the autonomous weapon systems. If I wanted to add one more layer of complexity, I would say, again, going to Justin's point about the privileging of the cooperation, and the scientists can come after me in a second on this one. But it raises the issue around open science, right? And all of the benefits that come from open science. Now, yes, there's great benefits that come from open science, but on the flip side, if you consider that the ability to hold back World War III from breaking out depends on technological supremacy to enforce a kind of deterrence, then open science is walking straight into World War III by eroding the tech gap in a context where we are in a tech race. And so your question is normally sort of posed to people from the perspective of kind of a values sort of base, right? And I'm not sure that that's entirely, I don't want to say it's irrelevant, of course, but I'm not sure that is any more the dominant question simply because the security environment is so bad. I don't know where that would now sit in the hierarchy of considerations.
Thank you. Toby, I see your hand, please.
Paul, I'm just trying to answer your question about the need for the human element. The day we decide that autonomous weapons can take full charge, we are assuming that because all autonomous weapons would depend on data. And if data can be polluted and it can be exfiltrated, then we have a huge problem that the weapon or any system wouldn't do what we want them actually to do. So I think the human oversight at the final point is quintessential. While deploying any form of autonomous, it could be a tool to hasten some information, but the decision to pull the trigger must be at the hand of a human.
Thank you. I see Patricia. Yeah, please.
I would agree. I guess in the instance of application of AI that I referenced in my earlier remarks of how electricity grids are managed, where the integration of renewable energy into them is so complex, and balancing of loads and demand and supply and storage and all of that, huge opportunity for AI. But electricity grids are the lifebloods of our societies, so the need to have some kind of human agency to ensure that that those are not misused. I mean, I think more broadly, if I think about environment and climate issues, they are, as much as we talk about them as in our interests to survive, to protect the human species and all of that, they are fundamentally ethical issues. So the need for human agency as we think about them is critical. And they're ethical issues from the point of view of within our societies, who is affected the most. It's the most vulnerable. Globally, it's, the responsibility of countries that have historically emitted the bulk of the emissions that are in the atmosphere and are causing the problem. So our responsibility vis-a-vis the global south, and then more broadly, the right of one species among hundreds of thousands to potentially destroy the livability of this planet. It's very fundamentally an ethical issue. So yes, I guess my answer would be echo my colleague, the need for human agency in this.
Thanks very much. Justin, I'm going to give you the final word, and then we're going to wrap up.
Just to go to what both Toby and Raquel said, that the data point of who's putting the data in, even when no matter what level of autonomy it is, it still has to have had some input until we have technology become truly self-learning and doesn't need any data of its own. I think we've got to actually here not just think we're starting from scratch again with AI. I think there's a real problem that we have that maybe not the researchers themselves in AI, but the politicians, the policy class are acting like AI is this new thing, like we've never had any technological revolution before. We've constantly made mistakes. Well, before, if you go back to Clinton in 2000, he said China won't be able to control the internet because controlling the internet is like nailing Jello to the wall. Well, they did it. He actually wished them good luck publicly. Social media came along. I was in the Australian intelligence community at the time. We judged that after the Arab Spring that social media would be too much for authoritarian regimes. It was the greatest thing to come for democracies. Well, by Brexit and 2016 election, we saw that Russia and China were controlling social media. We said that China might be able to abuse Western technology, but would never be able to innovate because of their centralized authoritarian regime. Well, now the majority of Westerners rely on TikTok to get their news. It's a 24/7 channel platform coming out of Beijing. Musk in 2011 said that China would never compete on electric vehicles. Well, BYD sells more electric vehicles than Tesla now. America itself said that China would never compete with AI innovation. We've seen DeepSeek come out. We just get it wrong every single time. We've got to stop getting it wrong.
Thank you. Well, we'll end it there. Please join me in thanking the speakers for the great presentations and leadership.